Welcome to Life Stories. Today, we bring you a powerful tale of courage, betrayal, and the strength to break free from the chains of emotional abuse. This is the story of Emma, a woman who spent years hidden in the shadows of her family's expectations. But when the time came, she found the strength to expose the truth and reclaim her voice. This journey of self-discovery, empowerment, and liberation will leave you inspired. Please subscribe to the channel to begin today's story and stay tuned for more life-changing tales. I woke up to the shrill sound of my alarm clock, my eyes barely opening as I reached over to silence it. Another day began. The sun wasn't fully up yet, but the world outside my window in the quiet suburban town of Greenwich was already stirring. I had just enough time to get ready for work, grab a quick cup of coffee, and head out to catch the commuter train. The routine was familiar, almost comforting in its predictability. It was the same every day. And yet, as much as I tried to follow the rhythm of it, something about my life felt off. In the eyes of my family, I was just another office clerk, ordinary, maybe even a little drab in their eyes. I worked as a secretary at a small insurance firm, making just enough to cover the rent on my modest apartment and the bills that seemed to multiply like weeds. A far cry from the high expectations my father, Charles, had set for me as a child. A successful real estate mogul, Charles owned vast properties in the city, luxury condos, and sprawling estates that made him a man of influence. There was no room for failure in his world. He built his empire with the iron will of someone who demanded perfection at all costs. And he had passed those same expectations on to me. I was never enough. At least, not for him. And the same applied to my mother, Olivia. She had once been a model, always poised, always elegant, and even now, she held a place of distinction in local society. People admired her beauty, but they didn't see the coldness beneath it. I could never live up to her standards, no matter how hard I tried. In her eyes, I was a disappointment. My younger sister, Madison, however, was the perfect child, the one who could do no wrong. Graduating from a prestigious university with ease, she immediately joined our father's business, working as the public relations director for his real estate company. The golden child. She was everything I wasn't. But it wasn't just that. It was the way she looked at me. With disdain. She never let me forget how far below her I seemed to be in every way. Her success came so easily, while I stumbled through life, struggling with a failed marriage, an unsatisfactory job, and a quiet loneliness that no one seemed to understand. It wasn't always this way. There was a time when Madison and I shared a bond, though it was fragile. But as she grew older and her success became more apparent, that bond broke. I became the family's failure, the one who couldn't get her life together, the one who wasn't worthy of their praise, the one who had been abandoned by her husband because she couldn't give him children, the one they never talked about at family gatherings, the one they didn't mention at all. But there was something no one knew. There was something I had kept hidden, buried deep within me, away from my family. I had a secret life, one that existed only on my laptop screen. In the videos I uploaded to YouTube, for the past few years, I had been running a channel called Healing Hearts, a space where survivors of emotional abuse could share their stories and find support. My videos, simple but heartfelt, had resonated with millions. I had built a community, a safe haven for people who had suffered in silence. My words reached out to them, offering a sense of hope, of validation. And that, I realized, was the part of my life I was most proud of. But my family knew nothing about it. They had no idea that I had created something so meaningful, something that touched the lives of so many. They never asked. They didn't see me as capable of doing something like that. I was the failure, remember? So, I kept it to myself. The quiet hours spent in my apartment were my sanctuary, where I could pour my heart into my work for Healing Hearts. In that space, I felt truly alive, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I had a purpose. But the guilt was always there, lingering in the background. Guilt for not telling my family about what I was doing. Guilt for keeping a part of myself hidden from them, and from the world. But I couldn't tell them, not yet. They wouldn't understand. They wouldn't see it for what it was. They would only see the daughter who had failed them, who had given them nothing to be proud of. The phone buzzed in my pocket, dragging me out of my thoughts. It was a message from Madison about her wedding. "You haven't replied to the invitation yet," she wrote. "I hope you're not planning to ruin my special day. Don't talk about your miserable divorce in front of everyone. James's family is refined." I let out a long sigh, staring at the screen. Madison had always been this way, cold, judgmental, and quick to dismiss anything that didn't fit her perfect image of the world. 2 years ago, I had ended my 5-year marriage to Alex. It wasn't because I was infertile, as my family believed, but because the abuse, the emotional neglect, had become unbearable. But they never knew the truth. They thought I was the failure, not him, and they would never know the truth. I put the phone down and moved to the window, looking out at the quiet street below. My eyes wandered to the certificates and awards on the wall. The things I had earned with my work for healing hearts. No one knew about them. But I didn't need their approval anymore. The truth was, I had been collecting evidence for a long time now, waiting for the right moment to reveal everything. It was time. Taking a deep breath, I opened my closet and pulled out a simple navy blue dress. Nothing flashy, nothing to draw attention. It was the perfect choice for tonight. It would help me blend in. But it would also be my weapon. A tool to expose the truth. My phone vibrated in my hand. A message from my lawyer. "All preparations are complete." I nodded slightly at the screen. It was time to face my family. Little did they know, tonight would be the beginning of the end of the perfect facade they had so carefully built. The ballroom of the Grand Palace was every bit as grand as the name suggested. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting soft light over the white and gold flowers arranged delicately on each table. The guests, well-dressed and eager to celebrate, moved about in hushed voices. Victoria and James's wedding was the event of the season. A display of elegance and wealth that my family had meticulously planned. I had no intention of being part of that spectacle, but I knew I had to be there. I had my own plans, my own mission for this evening. I walked into the venue dressed in my simple navy blue dress, trying to blend in with the sea of flashy outfits. The air was thick with the chatter of local dignitaries and businessmen, all gathered to witness the union of the Wilson and Anderson families. I moved quietly through the crowd, the sound of my heels tapping softly against the marble floors. I wasn't here to celebrate. I wasn't here to congratulate Victoria. I was here to expose the truth, to reveal the family secrets that had been hidden for too long. As I made my way toward my assigned seat at a table with distant relatives and employees of my father's company, I couldn't help but notice the perfect image my family had carefully constructed. My father, Charles, sat at the head of the room, proudly greeting guests, while my mother, Olivia, looked immaculate as always, gliding through the crowd like the queen of this social gathering. "Where's Victoria?" I asked quietly, though I already knew. "At the head table, of course," Olivia replied, her voice cool as she disappeared into the crowd without a second glance at me. I sat down, taking a small sip of water. The event carried on in its polished, perfect way, but in my mind, everything was already unraveling. The MC's voice echoed through the venue, signaling the beginning of the reception's speeches. First, my father stood up, a confident smile on his face as he addressed the crowd. "We are honored to welcome the Anderson family," he began, his voice strong, proud. "My daughter, Victoria, has always been our pride. She has the talent and beauty that does justice to the Wilson name." The applause that followed felt hollow to me, but the crowd seemed captivated by his words. Next, Olivia stood up. Her speech was about her own youthful beauty and how Victoria had inherited it. The audience chuckled politely, but I couldn't help but feel a deep pang of bitterness. It was always about Victoria, wasn't it? Always about what she had accomplished and how she had succeeded. Never about me. Then, it was Victoria's turn. She stood up at the head table, a brilliant smile on her face, the spotlight on her. "Today is the happiest day of my life," she said. her voice full of sweetness. Almost saccharine. "I want to thank everyone who supported me. Especially my parents. Thank you for showing me the perfect model of life." She glanced at me briefly, her lips curling into a barely perceptible sneer. "And I've prepared a special presentation," she continued, her voice bright and eager. The lights dimmed, and a slideshow began to play. The first few slides showed pictures of Victoria from childhood to the present. Each image depicting her as the perfect daughter, successful, beautiful, always surrounded by the adoration of our parents. The audience cooed, their approval evident. But then, something changed. The next slide flashed on the screen, and large letters appeared, almost mocking in their boldness. Emma Davis, infertile, failed marriage, high school dropout, low income. A murmur rose from the crowd. The laughter that followed was uncomfortable, but it only grew louder as my photo was projected on the screen. I didn't move, I didn't flinch. My heart beat faster, but my face remained expressionless. Internally, though, I was preparing for what came next. The audience was still laughing, their words cutting deeper than I had ever imagined. Victoria seemed to take delight in the response. "Don't laugh too much. She'll cry," she said with a smirk, clearly enjoying the attention. But I wasn't going to cry. Not this time. I wasn't the broken woman they thought I was. I stood up slowly, my heart pounding, but my hands steady. I wasn't the failure they believed me to be. I had a voice, and tonight, I was going to use it. "May I say a few words?" I asked in a calm voice, my eyes meeting Victoria's, who looked both confused and frustrated. Of course," she stammered, clearly rattled, "but please keep it short." I took a deep breath and pulled my phone from my purse. A few taps on the screen, and the words, "Healing Hearts Live," flashed across the screen. The counter began to tick up, viewers joining. Hundreds, thousands. The number rapidly increased until it exceeded 1 million. The room went silent. "I'm here tonight to tell the truth," I said, my voice calm but firm. I tapped the screen, and suddenly, the venue's projector shifted. "This," I said, "is the reality of emotional abuse in a family." The silence that followed was deafening. The chat box on the screen filled with messages. One, in particular, stood out. "The evidence is gathered. The legal team is standing by. You are not alone anymore." It was from Alex. He had been with me through everything. And now, together, we were about to expose the truth. The world was watching. My family, my parents, and my sister, none of them had any idea that tonight would be the night everything changed. The room was silent, the weight of the moment settling in as I stood there, my eyes scanning the crowd. My parents, Charles and Olivia, looked pale, their faces betraying the shock that had begun to creep into their polished facades. Madison, still standing near the head table, seemed frozen, her expression one of disbelief. The guests, once eagerly enjoying the evening, now murmured amongst themselves, unsure of how to react. The atmosphere had shifted from celebratory to something far more unsettling. I took a deep breath, my hand still holding my phone, steady in my grip. I could feel the cold gaze of my father, his eyes narrowing with growing anger. But there was something else too, fear. I had spent my entire life living under his shadow, constantly striving for his approval, only to realize that approval was always out of reach. Tonight, I wasn't the daughter seeking validation anymore. Tonight, I was someone else entirely. I was a woman who had found her voice, and I wasn't going to let it be silenced again. As I stood there, the words I had kept hidden for so long finally tumbled out. "This is the truth," I said, my voice unwavering. "This is what I've been hiding from you all. This is what my family has done to me for years. The emotional abuse, the mockery, the constant criticism. And now, it's time for you all to hear it." The crowd was silent, but the tension was palpable. My father, his face flushed with anger, rose from his seat, his voice low but dangerous. "What are you trying to do?" he demanded, his fists clenched. "This is absurd. You're ruining everything." I didn't flinch. "No, Dad, I'm not ruining anything," I'm finally telling the truth. The truth that you've been trying to bury for years. Then, the next part of my plan began to unfold. I tapped a button on my phone, and a new recording began to play through the venue's speakers. The familiar voice of my mother, Olivia, echoed through the room. Her cruel words about me. Words she had said years ago when I was a child. Words that had haunted me for as long as I could remember. Why can't Margaret have children? Her body's broken, just like her life. David was right to leave her. Men want to have children. And Margaret can't do anything right. The voices of my parents and Madison followed. But the sting of that one sentence was enough to break something inside me. As the recording continued, the faces of my parents grew more strained. Olivia's expression hardened, her eyes flickering with the hint of embarrassment. Charles's face reddened, his jaw tight, as he struggled to maintain control. But the damage was done. I had exposed the truth. The reality of the cruelty they had shown me. And it felt liberating. The laughter from the crowd had faded, replaced by murmurs of discomfort. I felt no shame, only the quiet strength that had been building within me for years. I wasn't the broken woman they had painted me to be. I was something stronger now. I was a woman who had found her own path, built her own life, and created a community of support for others who had suffered in silence just like I had. I took another deep breath, my heart still racing, but my resolve only growing stronger. These are the things I've lived with, I said, my voice now carrying across the room. The things you've never seen because you've been too focused on your own perfect image. But I'm not hiding anymore. I've spent years gathering evidence. And tonight, I'm showing the world what you've done to me. To us. As the screen flashed more evidence, more recordings, more truths, I noticed Madison's face drain of color. She was shaking, her eyes wide with horror. The perfect image she had so carefully crafted for herself was crumbling right before her eyes. But it wasn't just about Madison. It was about all of us. It was about the years of pain, of silence, of pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. I had allowed my family to continue their cruel treatment because I thought I deserved it. But I had been wrong. I wasn't the failure. They were. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence, broken only by the sound of my phone buzzing. I glanced at the screen. Another message from Alex. This time more urgent. We're ready. The legal team is standing by. The truth, it seemed, was not just a matter of words. It was something I could fight for. Something I could claim, with the full support of those who had seen me for who I really was. I looked at the stunned faces in the room, especially my parents, and I knew there was no turning back now. The truth was out, and it was too late for them to hide from it any longer. They had thought they could control me, that they could suppress my voice forever. But tonight, I had reclaimed my voice. And in doing so, I had reclaimed my freedom. A few moments passed before I saw Alex enter the room. His presence was calm, steady. He had changed so much since our divorce. No longer the man who had walked away in shame. He was now the man who had stood by me through it all. As he walked toward me, I could see the pride in his eyes. He didn't need to say anything. His presence spoke louder than any words could. The next few moments unfolded like a blur. The realization of what I had just done, the power of it, was only starting to sink in. But for the first time in years, I felt alive, empowered. I wasn't just a woman trying to make it through life. I was someone who had taken control of her story. Someone who was finally free from the shackles of her past. And as I looked around the room, I saw the guests beginning to shift uncomfortably. The Anderson family, James's parents, none of them seemed sure how to respond. Some had already started to leave. But others, many others, remained silent, watching, listening. The truth was now in the air. And there was no escaping it. I took another deep breath, letting the silence wash over me. It wasn't the end, not yet, but it was the beginning of something new. Something far more powerful than anything I had ever imagined. The journey I had started, the journey to find my voice, had only just begun. The chaos in the room began to settle, the shock of the truth still reverberating through every corner of the ballroom. My parents sat in stunned silence. their pride and control crumbling before their eyes. The perfect world they had carefully constructed for themselves was now exposed for what it truly was, built on secrets, lies, and emotional abuse. But for me, standing there in the center of it all, it was the first moment of true freedom I had ever known. I wasn't the broken, discarded woman they had painted me to be. I was a survivor, a fighter, and tonight, I had reclaimed my life. As the crowd began to murmur, I felt a sense of quiet triumph. Alex, standing beside me, offered me a reassuring smile. He wasn't just my ex-husband, he had become my ally. My co-advocate for the cause that had saved me, healing hearts. And in that moment, I knew that everything I had endured, everything I had suffered, had brought me to this point. I was no longer a prisoner of my past. I was the voice for those who couldn't speak, the advocate for those who had been silenced. Thank you, I said softly, my words meant for the millions watching this moment unfold. To everyone who has supported me, and to all those who have found strength in healing hearts. We are never alone. The room was still, but I knew that I had just ignited a spark that would change everything. The power of truth, the power of standing up for yourself, had resonated in a way I never could have imagined. For the first time, I felt a deep sense of peace. I had broken the silence, and nothing could ever take that away. Please make sure to subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more life stories that inspire, empower, and bring us closer together.